to talk about food, and what better time to do it during lunch time. So this is fantastic to do the combination. I love the overall theme of the FRI Summit on we need a new compass. And I think that's 100% applicable to the food system. Because the big challenge about food system, on one hand side, it's perfect. On the other side, it's broken. The perfect side of it, it's actually designed according to three key principles. It needs to be affordable food across the world. It needs to be globally available, but also needs to be tasty and nice to consume. It was never designed to be sustainable. And that's what we see at this moment. We rapidly need to reshape the food system in the coming 5 to 10 years, which is an unbelievable challenge. My name is Randy Acht. I'm a senior strategy partner within Deloitte Consulting, and I lead a global future food platform within Deloitte, which is all focused on how do we realize the transformation of food system together with our clients. And as Deloitte, we serve about 90% of all global food and agri multinationals in the world. If we talk about future food, it basically drills down to 8 pivotal themes. And all of these 8 themes are on the slides, as you can see. Each of the executives, investors, etc., know these 8 themes. And the good thing is, it's not the question of why or what do we need to do. It's the question of how. And how can we scale? How can we accelerate? Because, again, we need to get this new system in place sooner than later. The main reason why is that if we actually zoom out and take a look at the food system, again, it's a fantastic, positive, and successful system. If you look at the yield that farmers has generated over the years, it's fantastic. It's actually grown exponentially through further sophistication, technologies, smart way of farming, etc. And the success is in the numbers. Global food hunger has reduced from about 50% down to about 10 or 11%. But the job is far from done. If we look into what the food system is about, on one hand side, it's a massive pivotal sector. It's responsible for 40% of all global jobs in the world. It's also responsible for a lot of the incomes from smallholder farms in developing markets. It employs about 570 million farms. It's also a massive polluter in the world. Besides energy, food is the runner-up. It's responsible for a quarter of all carbon emission, about 80% of global nitrogen, which is 270 times more impactful than carbon, but also the major cause of deforestation and biodiversity loss. It's also about purpose. It is the massive link between food and health. But again, that link seems to be broken. It's almost like a divorce of two that just can't work pleasantly together. And again, you see this in the numbers, 1.3 trillion cost of diabetes. Overweight is a growing problem for our societies. But again, food security, because of climate change, is under threat. It's also a massively exciting sector. It generates a lot of new businesses like alternative protein, regenerative agriculture, but also plant-based materials. So in a way, food is to contribute to a lot of the other systems side. The challenge is, how will we make this work in the future? Because if we look into the numbers, we actually need to grow this food system with about 50% to make sure that we can feed a global growing population of 10 billion people. But the food system is currently broken and we can't extrapolate. So how do we do this? And together with that, how do we also face the climate change, change consumer preferences, shifting geopolitical power? How do we balance? How do we solve these trade-offs that you see that are inherently to the food system? So let's zoom out a bit more. Let's look at the future. And so from Deloitte, we did a lot of analysis, a lot of interviews with executives. What would be possible futures for the food system? And we looked at some of the biggest shifts that are taking place on the tensions from physical to digital, from competitors to collaborators. And that's how we got to 4 mega futures that we believe will happen in some way or form. Unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly which one it is or to what extent, but elements of these, ingredients of these, are already taking shape. And so to quickly go through them. 1, farm directly to fork. Think about, why do we still need retailers? Why do we still need wholesalers? Why can't food go directly from a farm to the kitchen of consumers and actually provide ingredients for in-house 3D food printers? Or second, food production becomes completely virtual. Already we see John Deere investing heavily in automated tractors and shaping kind of new ways of service model and value-based. Imagine that a farm will actually get a complete digital twin, where actually you don't need to be at the farm anymore to operate it. If that's the case, should the ownership of a farm actually split, where investment companies will do the ownership and operating companies will operate the farm side? And not only doing that for one farm, but for tens of thousands of farms. Or 3, imagine a world that's completely circular, where food is actually the key link on all of the rest streams that are taking place, or actually offset in the food system. And that will actually generate all the inputs that we need for non-food industries, like energy and chemicals, etc. And then finally, food and health in the future. Imagine food will be the personalized prescription. Really help humans to become better and have a more healthy life by linking the DNA, linking the causes of diseases with the right nutritional solutions. What this will actually affect will be a whole different way of our food system. On the left, you still see the traditional value chain of a vertical model where from input companies to farmers to all the way to the retail and consumption level, where actually the move will be more to the right. We will have ecosystems that actually work together, and where a food retailer will become a farmer and work with manufacturers in a closed system. And this will generate a lot of new opportunities, like new ways to earn money, new partnerships and conversation, but also new types of risk to manage. And this actually requires a lot of new capabilities and skills to master. Innovation is a key skill that needs to be adopted by all companies. And at this moment, we see a lot of companies switching from, well, I do about 5 or 10% in R&D and innovation. How do we get that to 30 or 40%? Second is, we need to master system collaboration. Again, these shifts are massive. We all need to work together, both public and private, to actually accelerate the change and really shape new ways of partnerships, solutions, insights, etc. And that also brings to the third one, transparency metrics. At this moment, we cannot inform a consumer what is a sustainable product, what is not sustainable. Big question is alternative protein more sustainable or more healthy than the original meat product? Big question mark. And so we need to actually get that level of transparency and metrics in place to actually inform consumers, but also for us to make better decisions. And then finally, new skills. We need new DNA. We need more green and solution style skills to make sure we've got the future that we need. So this was just a short highlight of what's the setting in the food system. What's happening? What do we need to take into account? And now let's focus on how do we make it happen. And for that, I would love to have my fellow panelists invited to the stage, and then we'll discuss some more. Thank you so much, panelists, for joining me on stage and discuss this incredibly exciting, but also incredibly challenging topic of how do we make it really circular, but also really an unlimited food system. Let me start with just a short introduction of my fellow panelists, and then we'll dive into it. Rosanne, I'd love to start with you. You're partner chief advocacy officer at Mukatava. Mukatava is the organization to really shape kind of the partnership between public and private and get the necessary transformations in place. I also saw on the website your company is actually nicknamed as the bulldozers in the Saudi Arabia yeah, situation and countryside. That's a big, well, yeah, excellent call out for the company that you serve.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Durya, again, also really excited that you're here. You're associate professor at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology site. You're also the co-founder and chief engineer at Red Sea Farms, which its sole purpose, how do we develop sustainable agri-tech to really, well, develop and grow tasteful products in very challenging circumstances and especially water scarce area. I think this is exactly what we need and more, especially in the Middle East place. And then finally, Ali Karamusini, close enough. You're the CEO of the research organization in Los Angeles, but you're also the CEO of Amidst, which is dedicated on cell-based meat alternatives side. And I actually saw your product on basically cell-based meat, which actually looks incredibly tasty. And let's be honest, it's the same as meat, right? So I think this is the right audience to really discuss on how we shape this future side. To dive into it, love to start with the first question, and actually for each one of you, but let's start with you, Razan. From your personal perspective, what is some of the biggest challenges or the paradoxes we need to solve in the food system? And I know there are many, but what's your number one?
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting us, and thank you for the FII for this session. So in Mukatafa, what we do is that we work between bridging the gap between the private and the public sector in terms of working on public policy development to ensure that policymakers are well aware of the main challenges that restrict the private sector from growth, ease of doing business, and increase cost of doing business. And cost is one of the main things that I'll touch upon here. But at the same time, what we do is that we ensure that investors are well informed about the changes that they should anticipate within the business or legislative ecosystem as a whole. So essentially in Mukatafa, to ensure that we work between the private and the public sectors for the most inclusive, endorsed, and impactful public policies. We recently have worked with Deloitte on surveying 500 plus consumers in the market in terms of the food supply, and a number of CFOs and CEOs in the market. One of the main challenges that we have found today in the end retailers, here we're talking about grocery stores and F&B restaurants, is the cost of the basic items in these restaurants or in these grocery stores. And here we're not talking about the chips or the chocolates or whatnot. We're talking about basic food products, be it vegetables, baby foods, and so on and so forth. So from the perspective of the private sector today, one of the main challenges that we have been witnessing through our research with retailers and with F&B establishments is the fact that the increased cost of basic goods is not only affecting the end consumer, because the consumer gets the tip of the iceberg, but there's a whole iceberg that the investor consumes in that cost. Once the private sector has an increased cost, this way we limit growth, so we no longer have more establishments opening. That affects employment and so on and so forth. So to summarize, one of the main challenges from the private sector today is the increased cost of products.
Yeah, I think that's a massive challenge. And again, that level of understanding at a consumer level, what that entire iceberg is all about, I think is critical. And then working in a system to actually resolve that.
Yeah.
Excellent challenge. Durya, from your side, what do you see as the biggest challenge?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting and being part of this event as well. I will shift that actually part that Razan mentioned to the vegetables and fruits, as you're saying. So today, I talked yesterday, world's 70% of fresh water is used for agriculture to grow food. And we are getting more and more people. And to me, the paradox is literally getting like, how are we going to feed those people sustainably, right? And then you think this problem is food, but actually it's not food only, because you need to use water, the elephant in the room, to grow food, right? And then you need to use the energy, obviously. So it's the whole sustainable chain is a bit of the famous nexus, the water, food, and energy nexus, and how are we going to break that? So that I find it's quite hard and challenging to work on sustainable systems that can lead to food production that is safe and affordable to the consumer. And that links to that is again then bringing back to technologies. How are we going to develop such affordable technologies that can reach to billions of people, right? So I'm saddened to see sometimes like we are spending all our efforts to develop the skyrocketed ideas or thoughts for Mars all the time, but we have a lot of problems to solve here on Earth today.
Yeah, no, spot on. Food is the most complex sector around, where there's so many trade-offs, there's so many systems that you need to work together to make this happen. And I think find the optimal kind of trade-off to succeed, but then also how do you scale at a global level and make it truly affordable side. Excellent. Ali, this is going to be hard for you to kind of top this so far, but keen to give you to it.
Totally. So after going such wonderful answers, I think to me the biggest challenge right now in terms of the paradoxes is we want the food that's healthy, nutritious, has all the positive things that we want with the food. At the same time, we want the environment to be, sustainable, and that's obviously, and we want it to be, not only sustainable, but we want the food to be cheap. So that's something that's kind of not workable with the current processes that we have. So, I come from the medical world, but I changed my focus to the food because I think this is the biggest thing that humanity is facing right now. When I saw the number that 96% of mammalian biomass on Earth are humans and our livestock, I just was blown away. So, obviously, we have, 1 or 2 billion people on the planet who are hungry, but we have enough food to feed the billion cows that we have. So that's why I think that the system is broken. One of the ways that we think, it can be fixed a little bit is to make things a lot more efficient. So, for example, at Amidst, what we're trying to do is trying to scale efficiency so that from a single cow, you can get 20 cows worth of meat every year without ever having to slaughter it. Or these sorts of things that actually allows us to reduce the biomass of what we eat that actually is destroying the planet, increase efficiencies, create nutritious, healthy foods that are going to be the pillars of us going forward that I think are going to be needed. We do not have enough resources for that 10 billion planet, and it's coming very quickly.
Yeah. I think that's a great reality check. We need to shift. We need to get rethinking on everything that we actually produce to feed our livestock. Can't we shortcut that and become a lot more efficient? Maybe related on that topic. So, you know what, Ali? Let me give you $1 million. Let me give you $1 million to invest in the most promising technology or solution that you see.
Yep.
What would that be?
Well, the first thing I would say is that $1 million will not move the needle in any direction. So I would say $1 billion or $1 trillion. That's the scales that we're talking about. But I would say, at least my passion is on alternative proteins. Being able to reduce the number of animals needed to get really cheaper protein, much more energy efficient. That's what I would invest it on. So obviously, I'm a little biased because I come from the cell-based area. So I think that that's the solution to humanity's problems. But that's what I would invest it in.
Excellent answer. Daria, from your side?
Me, exactly. Can I invest to my own company like this, or?
You can, but then what's the next level for your company?
Yes. Again, I think coming from science and engineering background, I would think to invest to materials companies that can bring solutions to the biggest impact. Again, I think what our issue is to look for solutions that is very either an elitist approach or to look for a very small community in the world to bring the highest standards. I think if there's a solution that could reach out to the really wider communities around the globe with science and engineering and innovative technique and affordable, I would definitely go for that.
That's a very aspirational goal, but something critical to actually make happen. So I get that. Cool. Maybe then let's shift a little bit, because let's be honest, I don't think there's enough capital at this moment within private companies to make all of this happen. We need to also team up on the public side. And actually, that's not only on the investing side, it's also on collaboration, reshaping policies, reshaping regulations, thinking also from a global side, but again, making it work at a local, regional side. Razan, given this is spot on with your kind of company and role. So what's your perspective on how do you make that happen? How do we really have the right synergetic collaboration to be successful?
Well, thank you, Randy, for this question. It's a very important question because I've been very keen on ensuring that we share with our audience today the unprecedented level of collaboration that we're seeing between the private, public, and third sectors here in the kingdom. Since Vision 2030 was first launched back in 2016, the speed at which the government is working at is unprecedented to the whole world. And His Royal Highness the Crown Prince said in his latest interview, we increase our speed every single day as well. So the question remains, how does the private sector now keep up with all of these different, I don't want to say changes, but developments? We're not shifting the dial, we're actually developing on where we want to get into and whatnot. So development is the word that I like to use. But in all cases, today, through our work in Mukatafa, what we are doing and what we are ensuring is that there are enough partnership between the private and the public sectors to achieve better alignment for public policy, whether that's through the chambers of commerce, whether that's through trade associations, whether that's through speaking with the consumer itself just to be engaged. I'll give you just one example of something that we are currently working on. So today, the Ministry of Municipality and Rural Affairs is updating all of its legislations for all of the sectors. One of these sectors is the F&B and the grocery sectors, with that large focus on ensuring that we have food safety and whatnot. Usually, in any government around the world, to update a regulation, the ministry would develop the draft, and then the private sector would review it, and that's the case in Saudi. What MOMRA has done is that they said, we will give the private sector for them to write the very first draft. And the private sector did exactly that. We had hundreds of investors, all kinds of sizes, investing their time and effort, and even beyond that, to write all of the policies for the F&B and the grocery sector. And what happened later, and that was 2 weeks ago, the regional municipalities came in one room and reviewed what the private sector did. Now here's what happened here. It's top-down empowerment by the ministry, but it's also very active bottom-up engagement. Once the two sectors meet and you have cross-sectoral collaboration, that's where you have public policies that are the most inclusive, the most endorsed, and hopefully, inshallah, the most impactful. But why do I say hopefully? Because we want to continue to monitor that work after these policies are signed on. The work does not end here. So measure that on many other policies that are happening in the kingdom, including policies we've worked on with the Ministry of Environment and Water as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and I think that should almost become the standard for anything that we're doing this month. Maybe, Durya, are you noticing this? Are you with your company kind of seeing this public-private collaboration taking place, and would that also help your company on Red Sea side?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, it's so great to have Razan here today. I was saying we should talk and with many others, because the approach we have taken is definitely with partnerships and collaboration. And if you would like to appeal to billions of people, solutions, as I said, you can't do it alone, or you can't do it just with private sectors. So we are going partnerships with organizations globally to scale and sometimes invest and so on in different forms. Yes, definitely. And I'm so glad to hear your perspective on how actually the policies can be born where those two sectors can meet. It's fantastic.
Maybe still staying on this topic, Ali, also from Deloitte, we're doing a lot of research on alternative protein, how to scale, because from Deloitte side, we're convinced this is going to be a part of the entire food system. But we need scale, we need to accelerate. To be honest, cell-based side, government is still lacking in a way.
No,
and so keen to get your thoughts on, is this happening enough, or what's your critical note on this?
No, I'm really glad to hear the Saudi government seems to be ahead of the curve. in the U.S., the picture is completely different. Everything is, at this point, private funded. And just to give you the scale, in the US, typically we spend 40, 50 billion dollars on medical research. There's been a huge amount of press about like a $5 or a $10 million investment in alternative protein, like cell-based. So the scale is just totally different. Like, again, coming from the medical world, seeing that, in the US, when we have a $5 million grant, we say, okay, that's great for the medicine. But when it comes to alternative protein, that's become the biggest news. Yeah, we have $5 million for alternative protein. So it's just like the government is not there, and there's a number of different reasons. One is that we have, as a community, not been typically inclusive of existing agricultural models, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do at Amidst, to really embrace sustainable agriculture, to embrace small farming and animals as a part of a solution to the future of food. And then the other thing is the field has been built from venture dollars compared to everything else in medicine, for example, that is built from academic science, bottom-up understanding. And that's why I think that there is still a lot of innovation to be made. The government, there's now food bill that is farm bill that every 5 years gets updated. There needs to be a lot of changes to that bill, and how USDA and other agencies treat R&D when it comes to this food systems.
Yeah. I think there's still a journey to take on that side. Lots of education, also of policy making, regulation. Also in Europe, I don't think cell-based has been accepted yet. So still a long way to go on that side.
That's right.
Maybe on this point, because it does require a shift of way of working, a shift of kind of skills and capabilities within the companies. Because to your point, we need more innovation. We need to speed up how to do it. Maybe, Razan, from your side, given the collaboration that's taking place between public-private, are private companies ready? Are they kind of equipped to kind of step up and do more? Or do you still see some success factors, some key capabilities missing?
It's also a very good question. Thank you, Randy. There's two sides of one coin here. At one end, the private sector leads in innovation, leads in technology, in systemization, in digitization, and a few other components as well. So when we look at the future of the retail sector, whether it's food and F&B or in the grocery sector, we're already seeing that the innovation of the private sector is going faster than the regulations that exist today. And I was on a panel a few days ago for some other conference, and someone said, sometimes innovation is faster than the regulation itself, because the private sector is just that fast. The private sector is always learning from global best practice and seeing how we can adapt to that. What we are seeing today from the government here in Saudi, in meetings we go to every single day in Mukatafa with the different ministries, there's always empowerment by the public sector, asking the private sector to come and say, tell us how we can support, enable, and further grow your different sectors. Are we talking about policy changes? Then let's see where those amendments need to be. Are we talking about subsidies? How do we do that without creating a future that will depend on these subsidies to thrive? We want to give you a kick, but then we need you to stay in your work as well. Are we talking about training, X, Y, and Z? So my point is, Randy, the private sector is ready, because the private sector in the kingdom is learning from global best practices, and sometimes it's even innovating things that we haven't seen in other countries in the world. And that did happen with the F&B sector, where our global consultant said, this is unique to Saudi. How do we make sure that we create a global definition for what's happening here? So this is one side of the speed. Yes, the private sector has that speed. And yes, the public sector helps in empowering it. We do have another side of the coin, which is the public sector better assessing cost of doing business. Today, one of the main challenges that we are capturing in our studies and our statistics in Mukatafa, in every turn we go into, is that there is an increased cost of doing X, Y, or Z, not just foods, but the costs of OPEX or the operations today are extensive. So even though the private sector is ready, we still need to look at large, medium, small, and micro. Not every single size is ready. So when we come back to the public sector, how do we ensure that subsidies or support or programs are designed in a way to reduce cost of doing business and empower the sectors to continue to innovate?
Yeah. A differentiated approach per kind of size of company, and then really overlaying the level of readiness to adopt.
But it also just goes back to the food supply. It goes back to farmers. It goes back to the poultry farmers, the egg farmers. We're not talking about a supermarket at the end of the day. It's that full supply chain that turns into what the consumer gets.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe,
So maybe
Daria.
can I just add very briefly, actually, or comment on what you say is fantastic, and I really believe Saudi can make a difference there and ahead of the curve by my meeting the innovators. You know, because one thing that makes add-on the cost of what you're saying is the new technologies, right? And this value of death to the adaptation of this new technology, which sometimes need investing, but mostly need the incentives. Because I've been discussing that so far, governments, what they do for farmers and agriculture is that they bring incentives for the water they use, energy they use, and so on. No, that should completely change to the new innovations to use the incentives so that the technology adaptation can be much quicker, and those policies would accelerate that massively.
Yep.
So I think that's very good that we're going in that way.
Agreed, yeah.
That's actually a perfect bridge to my second question. What role should Middle East actually play in transforming the food system? Because it sounds like there's a lot of hunger, there's a lot of need for how do we become a front runner? We're very dependent on new technologies, new way of farming and agriculture outside. What role can Middle East play? And maybe Ali, from your side.
Sure. Well, I would say one of the things that would make Middle East ripe for innovation, and this is really lack of resources that are needed for the food system, right? So being able to create food in a very efficient way, it's inherent within the region. So that's why I think that adopting some of these technologies, being able to really get to that, approaches that can be translated to the rest of the region and the world, I think is going to be super important.
Adopt and scale. Love it. Daria, from your side?
So thank you. I will seem I disagree with Ali, but I will actually hopefully rephrase that better. So I disagree in the sense like I don't think they should adopt, because the problem in this region is completely different than the rest of the world. And that was the approach like we have taken that because we're born in Saudi. I say this is the Mars on Earth. We're not living somewhere. So the whole greenhouse technologies, for instance, developed to keep it like hot, to keep the heat inside, and then those technologies are tried to be adopted to whole Middle East and so on, which was not like the logical sense, of course. But that's why in this region that whole mind shift should occur, like how do we actually keep things cool? Heat is the biggest issue in not only Saudi, MENA, and now actually globally with climate change. So that's why I honestly think there should be more disruptive solutions, thinking of that what the problem is and what are the natural resources that we have, right? I agree that Saudi doesn't have, for instance, fresh water reserves and so on, but one of our co-founders, Mark Tester, for instance, is working on salt tolerant and heat tolerant. So in that sense, not adopt the technologies, but adaptation technologies to the climate is, I think, very, very significant to grow globally.
So not adopt and scale, but adapt and scale.
I don't know if I say the word, but yes.
From your side, Ghassan, how can Middle East really shine and be this front runner?
We're seeing a lot of innovations by the private sector already emerging. I come from the largest oasis in Saudi. It's called Al Hassa, and we have 3 million palm trees there. So I grew up all around an oasis of water and palm trees. Then now I work in public policy. When we sit down with His Excellency, the Minister of Environment, Water and Agriculture, and when we sit with the needs of the private sector for not just farming and not just for water resources within the kingdom, but also to export Saudi products to the world that are Saudi made. There are new innovations that are happening today. So the simple answer to the question, Randy, I'm going to keep on stressing this with every single answer, partnerships between the private and the public sectors. But sometimes the private sector comes up with an innovation, and there needs to be a development of a new regulation to ensure that that innovation is supported and implemented. So though there is acceptance for the ideas, but we need to regulate them so we can effectively implement and operate these innovations in place.
If I can summarize, effective, proactive collaboration.
That's it.
Okay. On that note, I'd love to thank my fellow panelists. I think it was an excellent discussion. I'm really positive. Sounds like we've got the ingredients. Now let's really accelerate to improve this food system. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very